Hey, welcome into another episode of the Fat Guy Podcast. I am the Fat Guy. Most people just call me Brett Mason, and I'm glad you have decided to listen to the show today. I do appreciate it. My goal here is to share my experiences and my research and what I've learned about a myriad of things, primarily weight loss, obesity, but as it applies to that, it leads off into all kinds of different paths, including type 2 diabetes and Alzheimer's and cancer and heart disease and all those type of things. So disclaimer up front, I'm not a doctor. I have no formal medical training, and so nothing I say should be construed as medical advice. I'm also not giving you specific weight loss advice. You should always consult with a physician. I'm simply sharing my experiences and my opinions, nothing more, nothing less. Nothing I say is meant to diagnose, treat, prevent, or cure any kind of disease. So, been overweight my whole life. Started a weight loss journey in 2013 that started out taking some powders and pills, and then it evolved into a plant-based diet, which was originally a raw vegan diet, and then moved to a more cooked food vegan diet, and eventually we landed at a ketogenic diet, which was just life-changing. And along the way, managed to lose about 125 pounds. The ketogenic diet by far, and everything I read continues to confirm this, is just one of the best ways to eat. But for those who get bent out of shape over labels and things, and I tell this when people are asking me about, can I eat this? People are always asking me about processed things. Like anytime something catches on and starts working, the food industry will jump in and try to rip you off. God, there's so many things with the word keto on it now. You don't need to buy things with the word keto on it. You just need to eat real food. This is why a plant-based diet actually works for most people. You know, a vegan diet, a vegetarian diet actually works for most people because if you do it right, you're just eating real food. And a ketogenic diet is the same thing. You're just eating real food. That's the point. The point isn't to try to lower your carbs and eat a bunch of garbage that was processed in a factory somewhere. The point is to lower your carbs and eat real food. And that should be primarily beef, although, bacon is good. I love bacon. Chicken is the worst. Chicken is by far the worst meat you could eat. It has no fat. It's pumped full of the worst types of substances. It's genetically modified to no end. And these chickens grow up in houses where they breathe in this high concentration of ammonia their entire life from their own feces that they lay in. And I had a good friend who worked chicken houses, so I know I've been in them. You can't breathe in there. I couldn't. I don't know how he worked in there. I would go in there, and it would be stifling, the ammonia. And so these chickens that you're eating, they live in that. They live in that ammonia from the day they're born to the day they die. So, look, I like his chicken as much as the next person. I just try to limit it. Beef is what you should eat. Beef is full of great nutrition. But it's basically that. It's beef. It's green leafy vegetables. Asparagus, broccoli, and cauliflower can be worked in too. You can work avocado in. And then you want things like butter, some good grass-fed butter. You could have some real cheeses, and this is not Kraft Singles or Cheese Whiz or queso dip. I mean, you'll find it in the fancier cheese section of your supermarket, and it's real cheese, and it'll be harder. Real cheese is harder than like Kraft Singles. Now you can get it in slices, don't get me wrong, but it's going to be a harder cheese than Kraft Singles. It's not going to, because Kraft Singles is not cheese. It's a cheese product. It's not actual cheese. So you'll primarily find that really, really good cheese, real cheese, has 0 carbs in it per serving when you look on the label. So that's one way that you can tell that you're probably on the right track. So we're going to talk about Alzheimer's and dementia and those type things today. I read another fascinating article, and I actually shared it on my Fat Guy podcast page and shared it on my personal profile. And so if you follow Fat Guy Podcast on Facebook, you may have already seen the link. But the evidence continues to be overwhelming that these cognitive issues, whether it be just diminished cognitive function, all the way up to something that's diagnosable like dementia or Alzheimer's, they're just closely linked to sugar. And it's really quite remarkable when you put all this together and we start seeing all the things that sugar is actually causing. I mean, we were fed the lie all these years that it was saturated fat causing heart disease. Now we're learning the real truth of the matter is, no, not at all. It's a combination of things, but sugar being primarily one of them. The overconsumption of sugar, which leads to the overproduction of insulin, and this is just damaging our arteries and cells and endothelial wall and all this stuff from the inside out, and the inflammation is insane. And also the link to cancer and the link to what they have called for some time. I've heard this called a lot over my past year, especially reading and studying Alzheimer's. They've referred to a lot as type 3 diabetes. And this article kind of dispels that. It's not technically type 3 diabetes, but it's becoming more and more clear that Alzheimer's is pretty much a direct result or side effect of a high sugary, Western diet that we all eat. And while the path to diabetes certainly can come through type 2 diabetes, this new longitudinal study that just came out, which involved over 5,000 people over 10 years, shows that even if you never developed to the point that you have diagnosed type 2 diabetes, you could still have a faster rate of decline of cognitive function than those people with normal blood sugars. So even though technically you might have not been type 2 diabetic, because it's not really about the blood sugar. I mean, the blood sugar is damaging, but it's really about the super high levels of insulin. And I've talked about this in other podcasts. And this is one of the most eye-opening, revealing things to me when I grasped this and understood it. You basically have what leads to a diagnosis of diabetes long before the diagnosis ever comes, but your body keeps pumping out more and more insulin to compensate for how ineffective the insulin is. So picture this: your sugar gets higher, you have insulin resistance, which is part of the overall metabolic syndrome, but you have insulin resistance, so it just doesn't work as well. So your body compensates by flooding out more insulin, and so when it does that, it'll keep the blood sugar down. And then you become more insulin resistant, and your body has to flood out even more insulin. So, if doctors would measure your insulin rather than measuring your blood sugar, they'd be able to diagnose you on the path to all these diseases way before they come. They'd be able to diagnose that type 2 diabetes was in your future to, 5-10 years before you ever get it. They'd be able to tell you, hey, bad things are coming. Heart disease is coming. Potentially cancer is coming. Potentially Alzheimer, dementia is coming, because your insulin levels are through the roof. And the day you finally get diagnosed with type 2 diabetes was when the beta cells in the pancreas finally just die off, and they're just incapable of keeping up with the demand, and they can't pump out any more insulin. And so then, bam, blood sugars go through the roof. And then to add insult to injury, the doctors at some point will typically move to you giving yourself insulin. So you're pumping even more insulin into your body, which is even more killing you. So it's sugar. Sugar is the genesis of it, but the chain behind it is it's just not good all the way down the chain. There's a lot of interesting things in this article, and we're not going to hit on a lot of them, but there's a product of insulin, an insulin degrading enzyme that breaks down to amyloid proteins in the brain. And they say this clumps up and leads to Alzheimer's disease. Now, all this begins with a sugar issue. So people who don't have enough insulin, like people whose ability to produce insulin has been tapped out by diabetes, aren't going to make enough of the enzyme to break up those brain clumps. And so, it's just very likely if you got type 2 diabetes that Alzheimer's could be one of your ends. And it's such a bad way to go to. It just really is. So, I don't know. I want people to lose weight, but I want people to be healthy. There's another study where nearly 1,000 people were divided into 4 groups, which was based on how much carbohydrate they eat. And carbohydrate is sugar, okay? Especially in its processed form. The only safe form of carbohydrate is the kind that's wrapped up in fiber from nature. So that would be the very small amount of carbohydrate that comes in greens, lettuce, asparagus, broccoli, cauliflower, things of this, spinach, things of this nature. So in this study, the group that ate the most carbohydrates had an 80% higher chance of developing cognitive impairment than those who were on the lower end. I mean, it doesn't get any more, God, I don't want to say, written in stone, but basically it is. The funny thing about keto is so quickly you'll realize that basically everything that was wrong with you that you've experienced is because of you've been eating sugar and carbs. So I'll end this podcast by just going over a few things that just completely changed for me. Obviously, the weight loss started happening, which was fantastic. But it was just a couple of weeks in, and I noticed that the joint pains in my knees was gone, and my back pain was I don't know, maybe one tenth of what it was before. Just general overall aches and pains and things of that sort were just going away and going away and going away. I have very sensitive tooth pain issues, and I have a rear top, I guess my rear back top, I guess it's a molar, I don't know, I'm not a dentist, has actually had a hole in it for a long time, and I've been needing to get it pulled, and I put it off because, when I was going through that with my mom, I tried to take care of her the last, whatever year she was alive, and I devoted 100% of my time to her. I just put it to the back burner, and then I've dealt with grief and issues and all kinds of things since, and I just haven't taken care of myself, honestly. But I hardly even notice that there's an issue there when I eat keto. But boy, if I eat any kind of regular food that's high in carb, processed carbohydrates, sugar, and stuff like that, all that flares up. Plus all these other little issues, and my teeth just flare up, even to the point that I'll, get very mild bleeding gums and stuff. When you're eating keto, all that goes away, man. You don't have problems with your mouth. You don't have problems with your teeth. It's funny. I read a study, about a month ago, where they looked at these indigenous peoples in areas where there is no processed sugar and stuff. These people live into their 80s and 90s and low hundreds, and they still have all their original teeth, which is unheard of in America. It just is unheard of. And it's the diet that causes it. We're just constantly bombarding our mouth with sugar. So you could just go on and on. The reasons to stop eating food that is produced in factories are endless. And that's what I try to tell people. Look, keto, or the right way to eat, isn't hard to understand. If you can't make it at home with basic utensils, you shouldn't be eating it. So when you buy some of this highly processed stuff that comes in a box or comes in a sack or comes in a bag or, whatever it is that you love to eat, ask yourself if you could go in your kitchen and produce something that looked identical to that with all those ingredients in it, using a bowl and a blender or, food processor or something. And, how close would you come to making that happen? And, I mentioned that to somebody the other day, and they said, well, what about butter? Well, butter has been made for hundreds and hundreds of years with a simple churn. It's just elbow grease. You don't have to have fancy equipment to make butter. You don't really have to have fancy equipment to make cheese, real cheese. Those things you can make. Now, making something like cheese whiz or queso dip from scratch would be a little bit, it's going to involve some chemicals or some kind of machinery or something. But it's real food. It's like, I remember when I was growing up, man, and we didn't grow the best food because even though you're growing real food, if you have already damaged your metabolism, then some of the foods that you could eat if you hadn't damaged your metabolism are off the list, unfortunately. And that'd be corn, and that'd be potatoes and things like that. But now, if you'd never damaged your metabolism from birth by eating all this other junk, potatoes and corn could be a part of a healthy diet because it is real food. But once you've just shot your metabolism and that whole set of functions, whether it be from insulin resistance and everything that's involved with that, well, then you can't have the potatoes anymore because it's really high starch, and you can't have the corn anymore because it's really, really high starch. But if you'd eat real food your whole life, potatoes and corn could be a part of a healthy diet, but because it's real food. But when we've gone too far and we've got damage inside, and so now we're having to try to hack that and work around it and try to be healthy, you got to cut those things out. And so but everything else pretty much that you grew or your great-great-grandparents grew, and the way they grew up, they had the cow out back, or they had the pig, hog out back, and they grew greens and things like that, just simple things to eat, man. That's the food you eat. And your great-grandparents likely could have made butter, cheeses, etc. like that. So it's a really simple way to eat. I find that people make it complicated. I was talking with somebody day before yesterday, was asking for my help, and they had been trying a ketogenic diet on their own, and they started running down all the crap they'd been eating. I'm like, you're not eating a keto diet. You're just eating a junk food diet with a lot of things with the word keto on it. You're still eating junk. You're eating highly processed junk, and that's why you're not losing weight. Especially with chicken. I find that a lot of people go keto and they try to make it happen with chicken. You just can't do it with chicken. First of all, chicken is a horrible food, as I talked about earlier in this podcast. But not only that, it's just not fatty. It doesn't have very many nutrients in it. Beef is by far the fattiest, which helps with a lot of things, fat-soluble vitamins and your satiety, so you don't get hungry, and all these other things that fat contributes to. And then there's just way more nutrition in beef, especially if you get really good high-quality beef. And you just don't get that from chicken. Chicken is garbage. It's real food, but it's the garbage end of the real food. So, look, I love chicken, and I still eat it, but your goal should be to make that a once-a-week treat or something. You have chicken, or, once every couple of weeks we're going to have some chicken or something, and then you stick with beef the rest of the time, other than working bacon in. Get you some good bacon that's doesn't have smoked flavoring in it, but it's actually, smoked, hickory smoked, and it doesn't have nitrites and stuff added to it. All bacon's going to have nitrates in it. But there's a difference in that and them actually adding it to it, which a lot of them do. So get you a high quality bacon, and bacon is fine for you, in my opinion. The perfect keto meal, and I tell everybody this, you want to know what the perfect keto meal is? The absolute most perfect keto meal is bacon and eggs cooked in butter. That is the perfect keto meal. It's high fat. It has a moderate amount of protein, has an ample amount of some nutrition in it. It's primarily from the eggs. And it's just really good for you. Nevertheless, I have other podcasts where I talk about how to eat. I hope you've enjoyed this one. You can follow us on social media. I'm not doing Snapchat anymore. So if you're inclined to want to know what I eat every day, I haven't been posting that, but I'm going to get back to it. I'm going to start doing all that on Instagram stories. So that's where I'll post stuff like what I'm eating or stuff I'm buying. Will be an Instagram story. So follow me on Instagram, Fat Guy Podcast. I'm phasing out Snapchat. It's just too much stuff. I just can't keep up with all of them. So I'm phasing out Snapchat. So add me on Instagram, Fat Guy Podcast, for that kind of content. Of course, podcasts and articles and stuff like that. It's primarily on Facebook, and that's Fat Guy Podcast as well. And Twitter just kind of mirrors everything else. Stuff I share on other social media, I mirror it over the Twitter, but you can follow me there as well, Fat Guy Podcast. And subscribe to the podcast. If you already use Apple Podcasts and stuff and you understand that, look, subscribe to it so it shows up, when we get 2 episodes. And if you're not familiar with all that, download the Spreaker app, Spreaker. When you download the Spreaker app, just search for Fat Guy Podcast. Hit the heart, follow it, and you'll get notifications about new episodes, and you can scroll back and look at all the previous episodes. Thanks so much for listening today. I hope that I've been able to help you in some way. Good luck and keto on.